Well, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folani. Today, the President will be addressing both houses of the National Assembly in a joint sitting. It's all about the budget. Of course, TVC News is going to be all over it. We'll be covering it, and there will be analyses to follow right through the day, I dare say even until, the following days. But in the meantime, as we're preparing, our Joke Adisa in Abuja, she's there now, and she'll just give us a background. Good morning, Joke. I can see we're all prepared for the budget.
Exactly. We are set to receive Mr. President at exactly 11 a.m. Is expected to begin his address. I'm sure that in the next few minutes, the countdown has indeed begun. And before 11, by 10:50, 10:55, he should be here, and he will head straight to the House of Representatives chamber, where both the senators and the members of the House of Reps have converged to receive him. So we are waiting earnestly to see the witness his arrival. And let me also say that this year's exercise is coming without the usual fanfare, the razzmatazz, where you see a deluge of aides, ministers and others.
Indeed.
I think from the executive side, what we were told yesterday is that it's a maximum of 20 members, 20-member delegation that is coming with the president. So, and that is basically because of this COVID-19 pandemic. Right now, the Senate has just finished its sitting, a very brief sitting, and the senators have moved to the House of Reps chambers, so they are getting set to receive the president.
Indeed. And along the lines that you're speaking about, some of the innovations for this year, because the National Assembly intends to really subscribe to all the, conditions of these times. So, as you've just said, social distancing, and also that it's going to, the whole ceremony, the whole affair is going to be a 1-hour affair.
1 hour. Usually we see the exercise drag up to 3-4 hours, but this time around, they have said it will not take beyond 1 hour, just because of the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So we are waiting, and as soon as he comes, he heads straight to business. It will give highlights of the budget, and so we'll see. And some members, of course, have raised issues when the MTEB and the FSP, that financial document was being considered. They have raised issues about Nigeria's rising debt profile, and also about implementation of the current budget. Mm-hmm. Those are issues that will come on the front burner as issues begin to open on these particular budgets.
Right, Joke, thank you very much. If we need you, we'll revert, but we're all waiting for Mr. President. Thank you. Okay, so now back to our studio here, and our guest in studio is Mr. David Hundeyin. He's a journalist, a writer, journalist, and dare I add, economic analyst.
You could say so.
Indeed. All right. So thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, what would be your, what are your impressions about budget this year as opposed to last year? The minister has given a number of ways in which it's been up. Certain provisions have been up from last year. But your general conclusion?
My general idea of this budget, based on what I've read of it so far, the information that is available so far, is that it's an unusually realistic budget for this administration. So what I think we've been used to for the past 4 or 5 years is that usually the income projections are usually very optimistic. Usually the expense projections as well are also very optimistic, and then the budget achieves maybe 55 or 60% implementation. And then we just move on and we leave it like that. But for whatever reason, this budget, based on at least the top line figures that are available, we're going to see later on what the actual breakdown is. But based on the top line figures that are available, I believe the income projection was 7.89 trillion naira. Total expenditure was 13.08 trillion naira, which obviously there's still a a significant shortfall. But I thought it was surprisingly realistic. For example, the crude oil price benchmark given.
Exactly. I was going to come to the benchmarks. The assumptions that the budget Mr. President will be presenting are based on. As
Yes.
you wanted to start off with the
So
crude oil
the
benchmark.
benchmark given is $40 per barrel for the year 2021. The projection from Goldman Sachs is that from the end of 2020, the price should be hovering around $45. It should go up to as high as $65 in 2021, and then come back down and settle around $58. So
Then the quota.
yes. So
the quota that
the total quota was the quota given in the budget was 1.8 something million barrels per day, but that also includes 400,000 barrels per day of condensate.
Exactly. So because I'm sure a lot of us would have thought that aren't we breaking the pact,
OPEC
the
quota.
OPEC pact? But
So
the minister explained that.
the minister
not really.
actually explained that. So we're within our quota of 1.4 million barrels per day, and the extra 400,000 is condensate, which is not covered by OPEC. So generally, my idea
And then the exchange rate.
that is probably the one sticking point that I have. I believe the exchange rate is still quite optimistic. I believe it was 379 naira to a dollar. The parallel rate on the street right now is almost 100 naira more than that. There's a huge divergence. I believe whether obviously the CBN will beg to disagree, but I believe in the coming 12 months we're going to have to experience a significant devaluation of the naira. I don't think we want that to happen, but I think it's going to happen anyway. I think that exchange rate projection is still quite optimistic. It's not as bad as the previous years. Again, I must stress that this was an unusually realistic budget. I really was. I'm dare I say pleasantly surprised. If
But it still is a deficit budget, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But compared to, like, for example, the 2016 budget, which was like an absolute monstrosity. It was, and that's kind of what I've come to expect over the past few years. But I got the impression that finally the message is getting through in Abuja that Nigeria is broke.
Okay, and along the lines that you are speaking about it being realistic and all of that from your perception, there also is the matter of what is now the inflation rate that's been factored in.
11.95%, I believe it was.
Yeah.
I mean, well, that's not great, but that sounds about right. That's just about what.
That we're running at something like 11% inflation.
Nigeria does between 11 and 16% annually. So I think 11.95%. Well, it's not great, but
Okay. As I said, we're waiting on the president, and these are the sort of facts or background that we've been given already. So we know that the budget will indeed be based on that. So it's really like no surprises really. It's just that the ceremony, or how would you say it? The ceremony has to be performed, but we've been given the key indicators, haven't we?
Yeah. In the typical manner of the Nigerian government, the theater is very important. The optics of it all.
I like the way you say in the typical manner of the Nigerian government.
Yeah, I mean, we should be happy that they are not commissioning the budget, because usually, the Nigerian government doesn't need an excuse to cut a ribbon for anything. But generally, as I've said a couple of times now, I get the sense that there isn't that feeling of there being a jamboree in Abuja this time around. I think the message is finally starting to sink in, maybe also as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So maybe that has made people sort of come back down to earth.
So, but you said something in there, using language that everybody can understand, layman or not, that the realization seems to be dawning that Nigeria is broke.
Yes, very broke.
Nigeria is broke, and here we are. We have the challenge of developmental challenges, infrastructural challenges. All sorts of projects are going on all over the country, especially the whole transportation thing, the rail thing. Now, all of that is going to cost a pretty penny, and
a lot of it is debt funded as well,
which is worrying to some commentators, really.
Yes.
Which is worrying to a number of commentators. But as you know, government seems to say, well, this is one of the ways in which we can almost just about have our cake and eat it, bearing in mind that we will not have a problem repaying the debt that is going to ensue from all of this?
We will have a problem, I think. Already Nigeria spends...
The Minister of the Transport has said, even though finance is not his bag,
yes,
but apparently they've all agreed among themselves that we won't have a difficulty in meeting the challenge, especially when that whole furore, broke about we had better start learning Chinese nowadays, yes, because China is going to actually virtually own, a number of our national assets.
So in terms of the expenses, I don't have a problem with borrowing from China to build infrastructure. Mm-hmm. The issue that I believe has always existed is that what infrastructure is being built. Because if you're building debt-funded infrastructure, then...
Okay. Yeah, please continue. These are live pictures as they are getting ready in the assembly.
I was saying, so if you're going to be building debt-funded infrastructure, it has to pay back, it has to service the debt. So, and for example, with the investments in rails, I've always maintained that the most profitable way to invest in rails in Nigeria would be to connect east to west, latitudinal rails as against longitudinal from north to south. But the government seems intent on maintaining that British colonial system of doing north to south longitudinal rails, which I personally don't think is going to, be particularly profitable, and I don't think it's going to pay off the debt on that infrastructure in as short a time as, like, for example, the Lagos-Ibadan Railway, when it comes on. I believe that is going to take off like a house on fire. So I believe that the debt itself isn't necessarily the problem, it's what they're using it for that is the problem. Technically, Nigeria is if you use the measure of debt to GDP, which I personally don't find very useful in our context, but if you use that calculation, Nigeria is actually not a very indebted country in African terms. I mean, Zambia has something like 120% of its GDP that it owes in debt. I believe Nigeria is about 26 or 27%. So
in that context, maybe not too bad.
On paper, yes.
On paper. We've got to go to a break now. As you can see, they're preparing. In all probability, they're going to start. The president being a military man and all of that, well, an ex-military man, and being a stickler for timeliness, they just might start at 11 as agreed, and we understand it's going to be an hour. Stay with us, please. We'll take a break now. David with me, Mr. David Handeng, and we were looking at the budget. We'd like to talk about it. Maybe we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but anything of this nature that concerns all Nigerians, everybody's going to be all ears. But precious little information beyond that which has been put out there in the public that we've also, briefly commented on. It's like we're waiting for Mr. President. In a presentation such as this, everybody is going to be glued to it, yes, but you hardly expect any surprises. It's a bit unusual. I mean, we would have known. You spoke about one sticking point. That was the exchange rate that you spoke about. But apart from that, not usual to have surprises.
No, especially not in Nigeria. The expo has already been leaked, so to speak. We already know how much the budget is, which is the most important thing. Perhaps you could maybe argue that the GDP growth projection may be a bit optimistic. 3% coming out of the coronavirus pandemic. We contracted, I believe, 6%.
That target, comparing with last year was 2.9?
2.71, was it 2.9? So we didn't hit 3% last year.
No, we didn't.
So again, that's why I think it might be a bit optimistic because I believe the fallout.
They're all rising in there. The president is on his way into the premises, I think. Is that the president, or it will be the principal officers of the National Assembly? No, I think it is the principal officers of the National Assembly. And it is. Always happens. So there you are, they're receiving him. The president is expected at 11, which is, that's something like, what, 6 minutes from now? And there you go, it does look like this just might be on time, being led in by the Sergeant at Arms there. But as you were saying...
So coming out of the 6% contraction which we had in Q2, obviously we don't have the Q3 figures yet because we just came out of Q3. I believe the idea that Nigeria is going to have this huge recovery, like the way the US did, I think it's quite optimistic. I think we're still yet to see the bottom because
in terms of the dip? Yes,
the supply chains that were disrupted have not, magically got back into service. People's salaries are still being owed. Suppliers are still being owed. There's a lot of disruption that happened during the lockdown.
Well, it's funny you say that because the Minister of, for the Budget, as you remember, was saying that salaries have been paid, pensions have been paid.
Yeah, for civil servants, good for them.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's what you
But
say.
for the wider Nigerian economy, not necessarily the case. So we've just contracted 6%. I think the target now should be to reduce those contractions. Aiming for a 3% growth rate is fine, but I'm not personally convinced that we're going to get anywhere close to that. I think if Nigeria does 1.5% growth next year, I'll be happy with that.
1.5%?
Yeah, I'll be happy with that.
Okay, in terms of the performance, last year, the previous year's budget, the performance level is what, set at 60-something?
Yeah, that has been the case. Which is why, again, I felt like this budget might be a bit of a break from the recent past because with the exception of probably the only factor that you would say might negatively impact the ability to implement the budget is how much debt financing they're actually able to raise. Because I believe there's a 5-point-something trillion naira shortfall between income and projected expenditure. That's where the problem is.
How is that going to be picked up?
Well, only the finance minister can answer that question. I think right now, international bondholders aren't really putting their money in Nigeria. I don't think anybody's really. I think the only thing that will really help in that space in the short term is if the oil price jacks up, which, it's not really going to jack up dramatically to like that 80-90 region anytime soon. So I think they're going to be looking at more Chinese financing. I think they're going to be looking at more creative ways of doing things. I think the CBN, which is something I have a problem with, but which it has been doing anyway, CBN is going to keep on pursuing this unspoken policy of quantitative easing, which they've been doing for years, since 2016, and nobody just talks about it because they print a lot of money. And it's creating inflationary pressure on the Naira, and it's contributing to the exchange rate instability that they dislike so much. But the CBN is going to keep doing that, I think, and as a consequence of that, there's also going to be increased crackdown on USD transactions by Nigerians who have their money in domiciliary accounts, who are already having trouble getting it out of there. I think that is going to worsen.
That's going to worsen. In terms of we hear that last year, parastatals of government-owned companies are 10 of them were actually included in budgetary, in the budget. But this time, 60 no less. Is this a positive development? So now 60 no less government companies are going to be actually included in the budget, just taking out the CBN and the NNPC for reasons that have been given.
I think that is a good thing for purposes of transparency. I think prior to now, the way things were done were basically that the organizations that were listed in the budget had sort of like a free hand to essentially distribute money as they saw fit. And in Nigeria, when
that opportunity
exactly
comes,
there's a lot of arbitrage.
There's going to be. Let me take Mazi Okorafor. Good morning, Mazi. We can slip something in before the president arrives.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Jerry. Good morning, I'm glad to see you. Honestly, you see, my main problem with our budget, honestly, is just that we are good policymakers, but the problem is implementation and monitoring. Thank God for what the National Assembly members said, that they don't want crowds. just exactly like what happened yesterday with vice presidential debate U.S. between Kakawa and Pence. The main actor, the main shooter, they just happened about COVID-19, how to handle it. Thank God the National Assembly. But what I would advise the National Assembly is this. They should try as much as possible. If possible, let them have a roster. Because every day, National Assembly, the population is too much for them. Let them at least have a roster, at least start 40 or 50 in a day. Because not all the crowding. What are they? Because it's not healthy. I pray that the presidential team will do work, adhere to the directives of the National Assembly. COVID-19 is real. But the question is, budget. How do the poor man get food on his table? That's because the poor man will tell you what is the budget for. Well, it's good to make budget, but it's not going down to the main people that voted the government into office. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day in Lagos.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Mazi. It's always been a point of conversation as to how the extent to which the budget trickles down, so to speak. So it's going to be, it's a perennial issue. It'll always come. No doubt they'll be talking about getting better with it. But going to a point you made, and that's really out there, and it also links up with the point that you made about being broke, is COVID-19. It wreaked havoc globally. It just made nonsense of all sorts of, informed predictions and analyses. Hopefully we're coming out of it now. Okay, Mr. George has come on. Good morning, Mr. George.
Good morning, Uncle Yori.
Thank you for calling in. Good morning.
Uncle Yori, the budget presentation is not the issue that concerns me. Year in, year out, we talk about the figures that are presented, how big it is, but nobody talks about accountability. We are a country that, is developing.
Yeah, but they bumped up the number of, government companies that will be included in the budget now from 10 to 60. Isn't that towards a bit more accountability?
Well, what I mean is when you are presenting a budget, tell us the one that was approved for you the previous year, what you have done with it, and the extent to which the implementation, that should be the focal point. But what I see is all about how much is being budgeted. But nobody is talking about how much has been spent and on what it has been spent. But I agree with the speaker there, who says that there is nothing wrong with borrowing. But there's something wrong with borrowing and not using the money for the purpose.
For the purpose.
That's why I'm talking about accountability.
Okay.
Let the Minister of Transport tell us, for example, how much has been borrowed for the rail project, how much of it has been spent, and to what extent, so that we will know what to be looking up to. That. To me, that's what budgeting is about.
Okay.
Not just knowing why we are lawmakers sit down and think about how much you can get from it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for calling in. The Minister of Transport has, said, in the past that that's under the Ministry of Finance. We make the deals. We do it together. But they are watching everything, and those kind of figures that Mr. George is thinking about, those are the kind of things that can really be more effectively, presented by the Ministry of Finance, I would imagine. In terms of this budget, the National Assembly has, said that all of October is going to be about considering it, within. And then in the next 2 months, perhaps all the agencies of government, right up to December, will now be able to make their presentations and justifications.
Yes.
So that's the plan. It's not much different from in the past, is it?
No, it's more of this. It looks a bit more streamlined this time, I think, because of COVID-19. But it's pretty much more of the same. My real takeaway from the budget is that finally the fiscal situation of Nigeria seems to be reflected in the budget figures, because that up to this point simply has not been the case. Nigeria has insisted on building castles in the air until recently. But
really? Okay. Mr. Joshua in IREWOLEDE, good morning, sir.
Uncle Yori, good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning to your guests.
Indeed.
I hope that this 2020, that the executive and the legislatures will look critically at reducing the cost of governance. the cost, attributed to governing the country is always unrealistic. It is too much. Cost of governance, cost, as much as they fail to address that thing, no matter how realistic our budgets are, it will just be a waste of time. So they should, I hope the president will look at that matter along with the leadership of the assembly. Cost of governance, the cost of government in Nigeria is too exorbitant.
Okay.
Thank you, Uncle Yori.
Thank you very much, sir, for calling in. Big government, and it's an issue in parts of the world.
Yes.
Is it one of our issues?
It's one of our biggest issues, actually. I saw a comment from the finance minister saying that the targets, the 2021 budget was targeted to have, I believe, 30% capital expenditure and 70% recurrence. Now, in a developing country, that's absolutely woeful. But that was a target, and we didn't even get that. I believe we got to 29%. And she called it a win because we were coming from 24% last year. So essentially, Nigeria is, for every 1 naira Nigeria is spending, Nigeria was spending 86 kobo of it on just recurrences. So I don't, 76, sorry. So I don't really see how that is how that was ever going to be a sustainable situation. As the caller said, we are actually spending far too much of our revenue. The little revenue that we have on simply maintaining the government as it is.
Exactly. Is it because remember this administration, when it first came in, go back to 2015, had made sounds that seemed as if they were enamored of a slimmer budget, a slimmer, slimmer expenditure, collapsing some ministries, all in the interest of efficiency. But I'll let you comment on that, but I got to take Reverend Dominic now. Good morning, Reverend Dominic. We're waiting on the president. It's gone past 11.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, the young man before you there.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Reverend. Please go ahead.
Okay. For people who think Nigeria is rich, they should examine this the budget, proposal. To my little mathematician as a non-economist, the whole budget did not amount up to 300 naira per a Nigerian a head.
Okay, that's the president in a mask right there.
I look at the American budget, it's about 13,000.
I'm sorry, Reverend. The president has arrived, so I think we're just going to go over to Abuja.